We are down to 4 teams left in the NFL playoffs, and we're breaking down the DFS roster strategy for DraftKings DFS contest with SI fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano and Ben Heisler. Fellas, the conference clash has $4 million in total prizes. It's not as much as some of the Powerball and Mega Millions that are floating around. Still pretty good action for playing fantasy football to help people win some money. Fabs, I know you have a handful of bargain buys for this weekend.
Yeah, there was one winner from what I saw with that Powerball. That's nice to wake up to a whole lot of millions of dollars going into your bank account soon. I'm going to start off with Daryl Williams, but here's the caveat. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been practicing. He could be back this week. Williams is at $4,800. If Clyde Edwards-Helaire cannot go again, Williams would be the play. If the glide is active, then I'm going to shift to the Buccaneers and Ronald Jones. Now, I get it. Leonard Fournette's been really good over the last couple of weeks. He's actually scored nearly 45 combined fantasy points in the playoffs. But keep in mind, during the regular season, when Ronald Jones was healthy, he was the guy most of the time for Bruce Arians. And he's saying now that he feels much better than he did even last week with that quadriceps injury. So Rojo could be the guy for the Buccaneers this weekend. The matchup is right. The Packers gave up the 5th most fantasy points running backs during the course of the regular season. Moving on to the wide receiver position, and John Brown going up against the Chiefs. Brown was targeted 11 times last week. He had 8 catches against the Ravens. That's a good defense. Cole Beasley's dealing with a knee injury. He doesn't look right at this point. So Brown could continue to see more targets in the passing game. And DK Sportsbook has the over-under here at 54, so it could be a high-scoring game. John Brown comes in as the wide receiver 7 in terms of salary at $4,300. Moving on to tight end, let's go back to Tampa Bay. And Cameron Brate, yeah, I'm not talking about Rob Gronkowski. He has scored a combined 2.4 fantasy points in the last 2 playoff games. That's not good. Gronkowski has also run 34 pass routes compared to Brate, who's run 37 pass routes in the postseason. And the Bucs ran the football on 32 of Gronkowski's 54 snaps last week. We don't want that. Also, keep in mind, Brate has seen more targets than Gronkowski during the postseason, and Brate is cheaper at $3,000. The matchup's not great, but if you're looking for a bargain at the tight end position and you're off of, say, spending a lot of money on Travis Kelce, well, Brate is probably your best bet.
I spoke with Carson Palmer this week, who's obviously very familiar with Bruce Arians' offense during his time when they were with the Arizona Cardinals. He pointed out the fact that the Bucs will look to run the ball against the Packers, so that's a great call with Ronald Jones. Ben, let me go over to you. Typically, we call this low ownership players, but with only 4 teams, no one's really going to have low ownership. But who are maybe some of your contrarian guys for this week?
Start with Devin Singletary with the Buffalo Bills. It's he got pounded last week for 7 carries and only 25 yards. It really wasn't his fault. They just decided they didn't want to run the ball last week against Baltimore. But he did also see 3 targets in the passing game. He goes up against Kansas City this weekend. They ranked 8th as far as the most fantasy points allowed this year. So I think the script could change for Singletary, who comes in at $4,500, and knowing that he burned a lot of people last week, I think ownership could be lower, not necessarily low owned, but lower for Singletary, considering that he really didn't do much. But he gets the bulk of the snaps, especially now that Zach Moss is done and TJ Yeldon is in the mix, I suppose, in garbage time. But Singletary is going to be the guy, and I think that's someone that could pay off dividends at only $4,500. At the wide receiver spot, how about Sami Watkins at $3,800? He's been practicing this week. He's coming off a calf injury where he missed a handful of games. But playoff Sami Watkins, guys, is a real thing in Kansas City. In 5 games since he came to the Chiefs, in 5 playoff games, he has 24 catches on 34 targets, averaging just under 93 receiving yards per game to go along with the touchdown. And if he goes, he's going to be nearly bare bones priced at $3,800. I think he takes away some of the pressure on Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and a good opportunity, especially with his connection. Should Patrick Mahomes be able to play, I think Watkins, if both Mahomes is able to go and Watkins is able to go, could pay off substantial value. And then last one I like is Robert Tunyan of the Green Bay Packers. And yeah, he was my best bet to score a touchdown last week. Didn't end up happening, but I'm not going away from him again this week. It's a good matchup against Tampa Bay. Remember that he tied for the NFL lead in most amount of touchdowns scored by a tight end with Travis Kelce and had basically 50% of the receptions and targets that Kelce did. So he still has scored a touchdown in 6 of his last 8 games. The Buccaneers have allowed the 7th most receptions to tight ends and the 10th most DraftKings points to tight ends. So he's $3,600, was still an integral part of the game plan last week, and look for him to actually get into the end zone this week.
All right, we have plenty of DFS advice for the AFC and NFC Conference Championships, including Fabs. You have your player rankings up. You can check it all out from Sports Illustrated. Go to si.com/fantasy.